this is the point. We don't really understand what it is to be Russian and be looking at your borders are all being occupied by nations that are all in agreement with basically destroying your country. That's how he might be looking at this. So we're going to have to we have to be able to talk about this from both perspectives, both the Ukrainian perspective, which we're all sympathetic with and cheering for Zelensky. Then we have to understand what was the game that was played with our own State Department that put NATO into this awkward position with Ukraine. Why did the United States withhold hundreds of millions of dollars of armament for Ukraine if the Ukraine was the buffer between Russia and Europe? Why did we wait until like 2 weeks ago to agree to give armament to the Ukraine when we could see Russia was, if we were, as they say, they knew it was going to attack? I do not trust, and this is our problem, I don't trust what I hear in my own government because they've proven to not be trustworthy. So now we have to kind of forage for ourselves the facts and the information and get a handle on this. Ukraine is being presented as a democracy. Is Ukraine a democracy? Is it in fact democracy? By the way, we have some producers here. I got some of my staff in here before I pivot over to Mercedes and Gordon. Gentlemen over there, you're the next generation of thought leaders and journalists. Carl and Jonathan, what is it about this whole Ukraine-Russia thing? What is your generation hearing, and what are the questions you've got?
Would you like to take this one, Jonathan?
No, after you, Carl.
Excellent. That's what we're hearing. Back to you, Lance. No, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and it seems like the general narrative is that Russia acted unprovoked. If you do a little bit more digging, it seems as though there were some treaties that weren't being reinforced or supported or acted upon appropriately on both sides of the aisle. There's also, of course, decades that goes into these boundaries and these borders that it's difficult to get a 144 characters summation as to why this is happening the way that it's happening without really going into any great detail. So from a soundbite generation standpoint, it's too complicated.
It is, and I think they're preying upon that complication. I think that's what they're doing. Jonathan, I don't want to skip over putting you on the spot here. You never know when we're going to call on. You have any thoughts on this yourself?
No, I'd pretty much completely agree with what Carl said. From what I've seen on, in particular on social media and other outlets from people in my own generation is, interestingly enough, initial overwhelming support for Ukraine, and only recently have people begun to question a little bit of exactly what you've been talking about recently of the hidden narrative of not just taking it at face value and having a little bit more questions about why the elites are so involved in this, and just trying to peel back beyond the initial impression, emotional reaction of that's evil, that's wrong, and only now seeing people say, okay, like, yes, we can agree with that, but also there's more to the story. It's more complicated. But it's interesting to see even the people that are questioning that and the response, the massive negative response that they're receiving online. And so it's fascinating to see people have questions, but getting drowned out because of people just wanting to make it simple of good versus evil, as opposed to it's a little bit more gray.
Yeah.
Now, look, this is where I want to go. I just want to segue for a second into what the economics of this is going to be and the impact it's going to have. But I do want to come back. And when I come back, Gordon, I want to really talk about this rush to passionate moral posturing and the danger of building a head of steam that leads to war, when in fact we haven't really looked at pausing at the precipice, so to speak, and taking a look at the consequence of what we're getting ourselves involved with, and how we don't want to back Russia into a corner where it has nothing to lose other than the show of their own military resolve. But the economic part of this I want to touch on is how our own environmentalists are at the root part of the problem, because our radical, climate oligarchs, we got our billionaires also that are there. John Kerry in this absurd, here's an interesting article that comes out. John Kerry's reaction to Russia invading Ukraine is predictably asinine, the author says, because his main concern is there will be massive emissions consequences to the war. But equally importantly, you're going to see people's focus being diverted and their attention diverted from what? From the climate issue. So he's concerned about the climate fallout of this, which is such a bizarre take on this. The environmentalists in Germany, their version of our crazy climate crowd, shut down the nuclear industry, which was providing clean, efficient energy to Germany, forcing them to have to do the pipeline dependency, which is so weird, for Russia to provide them with the pipeline for oil and for gas, et cetera. And they don't have the alternative energy supply of nuclear, so they were particularly reluctant to do anything that would be provocative to Russia because Russia timed this perfectly. They're going to invade the Ukraine after President Xi gets his coronation Olympic ceremony and before winter ends, because it puts all of Europe in a dependent crunch where they don't want to be cut off of heat coming, especially when the energy supply could be coming them cheaply from Russia. So what I want to point out to my audience is the breadbasket of Europe, the 5th largest supplier of wheat is Ukraine. Russia's going to have that added to their arsenal. The only way that you can really hedge against the dumpster fire of inflation, potential food disruption that could be coming from the Ukrainian wheat breadbasket being disrupted, the energy chaos of having our own energy independence castrated by the left-wing lobbyists with the Keystone Pipeline, causing us to have inflation hitting our oil, which has already gone from $40 a barrel under Trump to 75 when Biden came in, up to 100 this week. It's all going to hit the gas pump. Biden's saying it's all Russia's fault. It's because we shut down our energy, just like the radicals shut down energy independence for Germany. And the hedge you've got to look at is, what do you invest in when the dollar goes crazy? When you have an unstable currency, you've got to look at what we've been looking at, which is gold and silver. Mercedes looks at cryptocurrencies, diversifies gold, silver, and crypto. But I've actually read a 21-page report done by Birch Gold. I recommend you go get it. LanceWallnau.com/Birch. Get the 21-page report on Birch Gold's summary of how the metals, how these stabilize during times of inflation, how to diversify your portfolio, how to distinguish between different types of gold and silver so that you don't get taken to the cleaners by somebody that gives you a bunch of certificates. Like I have Iraqi dinar investments. I got a stack of them because I heard about those years ago. But they're pieces of paper, and if they're not connected to actual currency, you got a problem. My word to you is get the LanceWallnau.com/Birch Gold study and look it up, see for yourself, and see why it is that many people are going in that direction to stabilize their portfolios so that when the dollar goes crazy, the currencies are stabilized with your gold and silver. Now, my question, Gordon, is you are someone who's a keen observer of media. Are you seeing anything that is a source of alarm in the way that the Ukraine-Russia conflict is being covered? And particularly going to drill down on the danger of like a 9/11 reoccurrence where we all kind of get so caught up in the moral messaging of a story that we move without due consideration into conflict and into consequences because we're all swept up in emotion rather than in thinking because of the power of media and social media especially. What are your thoughts on this?
I think we're all concerned. It is a matter of sources of truth and what our presuppositions are about those sources. And many people are talking about Karl von Clausewitz, the famous Prussian military analyst who wrote in 1832 series Von Krieg, his series on war, published by his wife posthumously. But the point is, he coined the phrase fog of war, and it's been used in many contexts. But it reflects the idea that we don't really know all of the circumstances and details, and we don't have sufficient situational awareness to know exactly how we need to respond. Well, translate the fog of war to the larger populace who are not actually engaged in the military, but are affected by policy decisions by our military and other militaries, because, as you're pointing out now, it affects the socioeconomics of vast swaths of human beings all over the world. It's about energy at the end of the day. So if energy policy hasn't been thought through carefully, or has been thought through and is being defied by complete ignorance or the manipulation of markets by a group of kleptocrats, including Biden, and these organized crime families which pose as political leaders, I mean, that's the concept there. And they've got a certain continuity. They divide up the spoils. They take certain areas. You take gambling, you take prostitution, somebody else takes drug addiction and so forth. I mean, it's a pretty bleak scenario, but it reflects something that was your question. Should we be concerned about the kind and nature of information? Look, anybody who's gone back and watched a movie like Wag the Dog or understands that's a political concept, by the way. It's not just the title of a film. So when you think about the way you can shift opinion and processing, and a member of your technical staff, if we start, Carl rightly said, I'm speaking for the soundbite generation, which is really accurate. In 144 characters or less, where we shape opinions and reactions, you're expected to have a reaction. You're expected to have an opinion. You're expected to have a sentiment about just about everything, or you withdraw, and then you're drawn into a kind of social cabal with the people that you like or like you, or by whom you're connected socially and technologically and so forth. So to answer the question very simply, we should all be concerned because sources of information shape our perceptions. When you double down on that and someone challenges a perception that you have that's wrong and is based on false information, is disclosed only over time, who do we look to for an example of what we ought to be thinking and how you pivot to truth once it comes out?
Hey, I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard so far. This is just a segment out of our entire podcast, but I'd love to give you access to the entire broadcast, and it's going to be at lancewallnau.com/podcast. Go there and you can sign up and get the entire unedited, uncensored message.